who benefits from the U.S. government claims that UFO threat is increasingly exponential? The U.S. Senate report, and we're going to read it below, which is an addendum to the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2023, has people talking due to the surprising statements it includes about the U.S. government's current position on UFOs, unidentified flying objects. I mean, unidentified aerial phenomena. They changed it to aerial phenomena now. I mean, unidentified aerospace undersea phenomena, and undersea phenomena as well, yes. This latest moniker for the thing we all still think is a UFO is the U.S. government's way of addressing how these alleged appearances, which began entering mainstream media attention in 2017, are said to be able to transition seamlessly from traveling through the air to moving underwater in what's been labeled cross-domain transmedia movement, because branches of the U.S. war machine are roughly broken up into forces specializing in air, sea, land, and space operations. The notion that these things move between those domains gets special attention. Now, we shouldn't be surprised. We have the Emerald Tablets written by Thoth the Atlantean saying that not only did they have interstellar travel, they also had interdimensional travel. They were able to switch from one dimension to the other. And according to ancient technology, from what Thoth wrote, they were misusing their knowledge of these great ancient technologies, and even though they weren't supposed to, according to God's commands, and it was only a matter of time, he believed, until divine intervention put an end to them, because they were harming humanity. So we shouldn't be surprised. Now, the UFO enthusiasts are largely focused on a part of the addendum which oddly stipulates that the government's newly named Unidentified Aerospace Undersea Phenomenon Joint Program Office shall not be looking into objects, quote, that are positively identified as man-made, end quote. Because of the obvious implications of that phrase, this is understandable if you've got a government office that's responsible for investigating unidentified phenomena. You can just say it won't be looking into phenomena that are positively identified. You would not have to add identified as man-made unless you had a specific reason to do so. Now, for us to claim that really jumps off the page, authored by Senate Select Committee on Intelligence Chairman Mark Warner, is a claim that these unidentified aerospace undersea phenomena are a threat that is increasing exponentially. He said, at the time when cross-domain transmedium threats to United States national security are explained exponentially, the committee is disappointed with the slow pace of DoD-led efforts to establish the office to address those threats, Warner wrote in the report. He adds exponentially. Now that's a mighty strong word. Taken in its least literal sense, it means that threats to U.S. national security from UFOs are increasing at an alarmingly rapid rate, that they have swiftly become much greater than they used to be. And we ask, why is that? Now, what is the basis for this incendiary claim? What information are U.S. lawmakers being given to make them draw such conclusions and make such statements and assertions? There's a long chain of information handling between an alleged UFO encounter and a U.S. senator's pen, and corruption can occur at any point in that chain, including the first and the last link. And the writer says here, I remain comfortably agnostic about most aspects of the UFO question, up to and including the possibility that there are actual extraterrestrials or extra-dimensional beings zipping around our planet in technology our science cannot comprehend. Now, I want to add here, though, that there are archaeologists that believe that there are still Atlantean remnants around our Earth and on Earth and in Earth, that is underground bases, that are still among us with their technology. And it could be them, since they once lived on Earth. Now, going back to this, I remain uncomfortable, agnostic about most aspects of UFO question, up to and including the possibility that there are actual extraterrestrials or extra-dimensional beings zipping around our planet in technology our science cannot comprehend. But one thing I absolutely will take a hard and fast position on is that the moment the US government starts labeling something a threat, quote unquote, all trust and credibility must be immediately thrown out of the window. CIA said most read on our best of 2014 list reports of unusual activity in the skies in the 50s. It was us, he said. This was the CIA tweet. It was us, he said. Okay, so what does that mean? That they had UFOs, things that looked like UFOs zipping around in the 1950s. Now, this is, after all, occurring as the US enters a steadily escalating new Cold War against Russia and China. And we know that during the last Cold War, the CIA sought to exploit public panic about UFOs as a psychological weapon against the Soviets, and that the CIA has claimed that its newly developed spy planes were responsible for many UFO sightings in the 1950s, and that the US military was working on developing quote-unquote flying saucer aircraft during that same time. It also occurs after the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Acquisition, Technology and Logistics stated at a 2020 conference that the Air Force has a brand new aircraft prototype designed using new digital engineering technology that has, quote, broken a lot of records, end quote. So this new mainstream UFO narrative also has highly suspicious origins, with key players ranging from shady U.S. intelligence cartel operatives like Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon to corrupt Senator Harry Reid and his plutocrat campaign donor Robert Bigelow, to Blink 182's Tom DeLonge, who believes humanity is being tormented by malevolent extraterrestrials who feed off negative human emotions, and that the U.S. military is heroically protecting us from their evil agendas. Filmmaker Stephen Greenstreet put out a short, well-sourced documentary with the New York Post this past May, laying out copious amounts of evidence that the groundwork for the new UFO narrative was built on journalistic malpractice and negligence, obfuscation, omission, and outright lies. The footage we've been shown of these supposed vehicles to justify this new narrative consists of blurs, flashes, and smudges, which can all be explained by mundane phenomena. So in my opinion, this is not a subject we can just ignore, as weird and uncomfortable as the subject of UFOs might be for serious analysts. Whatever the subject, when you've got the US government claiming on highly suspect grounds that there is an exponentially growing threat that urgently needs to be addressed militarily, it's time to sit up and start paying attention. Not that I myself have any clear idea of what's going on here beyond the distinct impression that we are being deceived without something potentially very important, and I don't get the impression that other people have a very clear picture of what's going on either. Some say this is just a scam to get more funding from the Space Force or the military in general. That could very well be, but as far as publicly available information goes, as far as it goes, we are not seeing anyone saying anything like, hey, we need $40 billion to address this UFO problem. Some say it's part of the agenda to justify getting weapons into space, but I suspect anyone likely to support that agenda would support it with or without the claim that we need to fight ETs. And again, there's a problem that nobody's saying, hey, we need to get weapons into space because of UFOs. Some say this is just a deliberate distraction designed to keep people from focusing on more important issues. But the problem there is that A, the empire does not normally roll out distractions in that way, and B, the UFO issue is not getting much mainstream attention. It's a peripheral story dwarfed in comparison to real propaganda initiatives like Ukraine. Some say there is a conspiracy to use high-tech weaponry to create a false flag alien invasion and unite humanity under a one-world government, but that's a fairly mainstream idea, and that's been pushed on viral Netflix films by known Stephen Greer. And I think the world is paranoid enough to, at this point, with few would buy such a psyops, even if it were somehow convincingly orchestrated. Some say this narrative is all a cover for a new technology the empire is keeping under wraps, presenting an official position that the U.S. government has nothing to do with the strange vehicles people are seeing in the air, as stated in the ODNI's report on UFOs last year. That would certainly explain the empire's cockiness in confronting Russia and China simultaneously, when public knowledge of its economic and military capabilities would indicate that that's a bad idea. It could be as simple as the fact that once it becomes an established orthodoxy in Washington that UFOs are a threat and something needs to be done about them, it's a safe bet that we're going to see massive amounts of money moving around to deal with that threat and the emergence of the war machine that can be used in future confrontations with Russia and China. There are many numbers of creatures lurking in DC who would stand to benefit from that happening and would stand to benefit from pushing that agenda. It's possible that contracts have already been signed. It's possible that finances have already been allocated for it from the war machine's dark money slush fund, and that all this public talk is just narrative management to preemptively justify that spending when information about it comes out. Or maybe it's some mixture of these things, or none of them. I don't know. I don't know that someone's benefiting from this at all. And I do know, he says, that someone is benefiting from this, and I know it's unreasonable to expect the most murderous, tyrannical regime on earth to tell us the truth about UFOs when it would stand nothing to gain by doing so. And we're ordinary people, should therefore do our best to understand what's happening for ourselves. And I think it would be good if people on the anti-empire fringes of the spectrum started looking at this thing more and describing what they're seeing, even though it's impossible to see everything behind the walls of the government opacity, and otherwise the only people looking at it will be UFO enthusiasts who just want disclosure at any cost, and the operatives of the empire itself. This is by Caitlin Johnson, a journalist, and the document here says it's the Mr. Warner from Select Committee on Intelligence submitting the following report, additional views, and it's about 23 pages. You can read it for yourself on the link I'll leave below. This is from Great Game India. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.